Hi everyone, welcome to episode 5 of Creative Craftmas. So today we're going to be creating a very special envelope for all of the kiddos in your life trying to send a letter to the North Pole. This envelope features some fun illustrative elements that I have added for a personal touch. I created them in Procreate. You can use my envelope design, or you can feel free to create your own in Procreate and then apply them to the final envelope SVG in Affinity Designer. I'm going to show you how to do the whole process. We are going to be using some of the same tools that we have been, like my iPad, Affinity Designer, Procreate, and that template.nl website so that we can get a template for the actual envelope. I hope you enjoyed today's tutorial. Let's get started. Alright, so to get started with this tutorial, we are going to go to templatemaker.nl. This basically is the website that we used to make our little boxes for the advent calendar earlier this month. What we are going to do though is scroll down to the envelope. So they have all kinds of envelopes. They have like mailers, and then they just have some flat envelopes. So that is what I'm thinking we are going to utilize today. So here they are, the classic letter envelope. So this is what we're going to make. We are going to keep it, we're going to change everything to inches. And I think this traditional size that they have, which is like a 5.875 by 3.875, should work just fine for this project. And instead of create, we're just going to hit more options so it allows us to actually download the file. So I think we'll keep everything as it is. And then we want to make sure we change this to US letter landscape so that everything fits within an 8.5 by 11 page. And then I'm going to download an SVG for this. And then I'm going to select create, hit download. And then we should be able to open this SVG file in Affinity Designer when we get to that point. And now what I want to do is go into Procreate. All right, so in Procreate, I started creating something that we're going to be working on for a future project, but I want to use an element from it, which is this little reindeer. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go into my Procreate file. I'm going to select my layers, and I'm going to create a new layer above my current layer. And I'm going to outline this, and then I'm going to pull it into a new file so that I can export it for use in Affinity Designer. So I'm going to change my color in my color picker from this gray to a black so it's easy to see. And then I'm going to utilize this monoline because I want my artwork for this particular image to look really kind of like cartoony. And then I'm going to go down to my first layer and I'm going to select the little N and I'm going to bring my opacity down. Once you click the N, you'll see all these other options here. I'm going to bring my opacity down, and it's going to basically make my original drawing less dark so that I can draw over it. So now with this monoline brush that I have, making sure I'm back on that new layer, I'm going to trace over my original sketch here. And what you'll find is the closer you are to your image, the easier it is to sketch and maintain the integrity of your original lines. And it's okay if it's not perfect. You just want it to be as close as it can be to what your original drawing was. When you're drawing full shapes, what's nice is that once you close the shape and if you hold your pen down, it'll lock into like a perfect oval or circle, and then you can go over to your color picker and just drag that color in and it'll fill it for you. And then you don't have to, if you want your eyes to be the same, or if you want them imperfect, that's fine. I just want them to look the same for this image. So I'm going to select my selection tool, which is that little squiggly line up here. And then I am going to use it to circle around my current image. I'm going to go to my toolbar up here. I'm going to select copy. And then I'm going to select paste. And then I'm just going to drag it over right next to it. And then it's important though when you do something like this that you have to group those elements together. And then I just like to flatten them just to keep my layers clean. So I have the basic outline of this. Now I just have to finish the details and then I can export this over to my Affinity Designer app. Alright, so I have this outlined. What I'm going to do is just select this and create a new file so that I can export it. So I'm going to use my selection tool again, making sure I'm on the correct layer. I'm going to outline this. And then I'm going to go to my wrench icon. I'm going to select copy. And then I'm going to go back into my gallery and I'm going to create a new file. I'm going to make this 2 inches by 2 inches. It doesn't have to be very big because this is going on an envelope. So I'm going to hit the little plus icon and then I'm going to select that little rectangle with a plus, and that allows us to create a new custom canvas. I'm going to change my options to inches, and then I'm going to do 2 inches by 2 inches at 300 dpi, and then I'm going to select create. And then I'm going to go into my wrench icon and I'm going to select paste, and it'll give me my little guy here. And then what I'm going to do, once I paste them in, you can choose to color them in here if you want. If you find that he's a little blurry after you've increased him, you may want to re-outline him again, or you can just duplicate a few times the actual image and it'll darken it, and select group and then flatten it. And I think that's good enough because, mind you, I made it bigger so that I can make it smaller. So I think the fidelity of this is just fine. You can choose to color in here if you want, or you can choose to color in Affinity Designer. I'm just going to color in here really quickly so you can get an idea of what your options are. I'm actually going to change this layer from just a regular layer to a reference layer. That way I can drag and drop colors really easily, since all of this is pretty much a closed shape. So I want to create a new layer on top. This is going to be the top part, and then I'll create another layer for the bottom part. And then I'll just rename my layers too, just to keep track of them. It's a good rule of thumb to do this, something I don't do enough. And then I want to drag both of them underneath my original line work so that the color doesn't go on top of the line work. So now I'm going to pick like a brown color to fill in this top portion, and then I'm going to color in the antlers a lighter like cream. So what's nice is once you like take a color, you can drag and drop really easily. So once you drag a color into your top layer, I'm going to do this brown. Then I'm going to go down to my bottom layer and I'm going to do kind of like an off-white beige color, and then a red for the nose. And what's nice is because we changed this original image to a reference layer, we're able to drag and drop colors really simply. I'm also going to create a new layer and I'm going to color in the antlers, making sure that that layer is still underneath the original drawing so that I don't have to worry about anything getting colored over. And I'm going to just take kind of like a beige color to basically fill in these antlers. And you could use Affinity Designer to do this whole entire drawing if you wanted, but I had already started it in Procreate, so I figured I'd show you all some tips in Procreate before we actually get into the Procreate project later this week. And then just to kind of make this a little bit more 3D, not that we're going to see much of it when we're putting this on the envelope, but it's just the things that I do when I'm illustrating. I'm going to add some shadow. So I'm going to create a layer on top, and then I'm going to click on that N again, and I'm going to change it from normal, or I'm going to pull the opacity down just a bit. And then I'm going to go and change this from normal to multiply. And then I'm going to find kind of like a gray color that we can use. This is like a simple way of adding shadows. I don't always suggest using gray. Usually I like to use like darker or lighter colors of the original color that I'm coloring on top of. And we're going to add some shadow where shadow might be. So if we keep in mind maybe our light is coming from like the top down, probably have a shadow underneath his nose here. You might want to add some shadow right on top of where his snout meets the top of his face, and maybe the area around the antlers, and some shadow within the ears, and probably just a little bit of shadow around the eye. And I think that's good for now. I think it's cute. What we're going to do now is we're going to go into our layers. We are going to turn off the background, and that gives us some transparency when we export this as a PNG so that we can place it into our envelope. So what we're going to do is we're going to go to that wrench icon, we're going to select share, and then we're going to select PNG, We're gonna save to our files so it's somewhere easy for us to find. I'm just gonna save it in Affinity Designer because that's what I've been working in. Rename it Reindeer Artwork. Once we're done with this, we can exit out of Procreate and we can go jump into Affinity Designer. So I'm going to launch Affinity Designer and I'm going to set up an 8.5 by 11 file here. So I'm going to hit the plus icon, new document, and then I'm going to change this from points to inches. And then I'm going to change this from whatever it is currently in the width to 11 and the height to 8.5 because we want it to be landscape, because this is the actual like file placement of that template that we created. I want this to be at 300 dpi because we are printing this out, and then hit OK. And this is our artboard. So now what we need to do is place that SVG file that we downloaded from templatemaker.nl. So we're going to go to our document menu and we're going to select place image and we're going to import it from the cloud, and we are going to go to our downloads. So this right here is our envelope. We're just going to place it and we're just going to resize it. Once we've done that, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to give myself a background just so that it's easy for us to see what we're working with. So I'm going to go into my layers. I'm going to add a layer, and I'm going to add a vector layer, and then I'm going to go to my rectangle tool, and then I'm going to make sure that I have a color selected in my color options. I'm going to select that white, and then I'm going to draw a rectangle across my board. It's going to cover everything, but that's okay. What we're going to do now is take that layer, click on it with our pencil, and drag it underneath our original layer. And we are going to go into the layer properties, these little 3 dots here, and we're going to select lock so that it won't move. And then we are going to build on top of this. So what we're going to do is we're going to create another layer, another vector layer on top of this, and that's where we're going to start to add all of our images and things like that. So the idea is to kind of make this look like, you know, an envelope that Santa would appreciate. We're going to add a little stamp, maybe some sort of like postage mail inspired thing. We're going to add that little reindeer that we just drew. So let's add him first. And then we'll basically put in Santa's address, the North Pole. So go up into our document menu, and then we're going to select place image. We're going to import from cloud, and then we're going to find where we save that image. I saved it under Affinity Designer. Wherever you saved yours, that's where it'll be. Once you've found it, you can click on it, and then to place it, all you have to do is drag across. Now that we have the reindeer placed, what we can do is utilize some outside sources. So freepik.com has some awesome vector-based assets that we can utilize in this design. I found a few, like this stamp kit here, but what I'm thinking is I want to go through the process of showing you how to design your own stamp, and then we can use some of these other additional elements once we get through that process. We are going to make kind of like a round postage note style stamp element that we'll put up in the corner, or we'll select our shape tool and we're going to select the ellipse. And we want to make sure that the ellipse has a stroke, so we'll go to our stroke options, increase the stroke width, and then make sure it has the appropriate color. So I'm just going to do this all in black and white. So once I've done that and I like the shape, what I'm going to do is just kind of reference these little icons that I found on Freepik and kind of get an idea of what ours can look like. Theirs are a little bit more rustic. They almost look like they're stampy, so they have like bits and pieces missing out of them. That is a little too advanced for what we're trying to do today. So we're just going to keep it really simple, clean vectors, clean lines. So I think we're going to do this circle one with the post office label. And then I'll show you how we can write on a curve as well. So once we made that first circle, let's just duplicate it. And then that's going to create our next circle, and we're just going to resize it by pulling in the corners. And then we're gonna repeat that process again, and then we'll adjust the size of the actual stroke once more in this new one. Because the idea is just to kind of have them just a little bit varied for interest, for visual interest. And then I'll copy that and I'll duplicate it and then just resize it by pulling in the corners for the third one. And this one is going to be a little bit smaller because we want to give ourselves space to have text in between the second and the third circles. That's where we'll put the text that we're going to utilize. And then we're going to duplicate this once more, and then that line again, pulling it in. Once we've duplicated it, pull it in by pulling the corners in, and then we're going to go into our stroke options on the right side and decrease the width of that stroke again. Then what we're going to do is select all of those elements, and then what we're going to want to do is group them. And when they're grouped, we can move them around all together really easily. So the next thing we want to do is add some curved text. So I'm going to put post office here and maybe something like made in Illinois. So to create a text that goes on a curve, what we need to do first is create that actual curve that we're going to write on. So we're going to go to the shape tool, we're going to select our ellipse, and we're going to want to make it so that it fits just inside of that thicker area. So once we've created that, we want to make sure it doesn't have a fill or a stroke. Then we're going to move that ellipse out of the way, and then I'm going to select the artistic tool, and then I'm going to click on that brand new ellipse that we just made that doesn't have a fill or a stroke, and you'll see that it allows me to write on a curve. It gives you this red and green kind of like adjustment nodule, and you'll be able to adjust the size of your font. Just like in all the other elements that we've been creating, I'm going to utilize that American typewriter font to just, again, maintain consistency. And then I'm going to type in post office, and then I'm just going to adjust the height and the width. And you can also still adjust it by adjusting and pulling out like the corners and the nodules as well, so that you can kind of flatten things or widen things just so that it fits nicely within that space. Once we've done that, we can copy it, and then we can update it so that the text goes from the left to the right and it curves up versus downwards as we originally had it. And to do that, all you have to do is adjust those little green and red kind of like nodule arrows, and it'll basically allow you to adjust the way the font is going to show up on the curve. So that's what you see me doing here. And then I'm going to update the text so that it says made in Illinois. And then I'm just going to do what I did before, edit the overall shape of this by pulling out my corners, editing my nodules, and then rotating things as needed so that it fits nicely on the bottom portion of this. Once I'm done with that, then I'm going to create a little envelope to go right smack dab in the center of this little stamp. So again, just utilizing my shape tool, I'm going to go to my shape tool, select the square, and then create a rectangle. And you may need to adjust and kind of like rotate things out, because if you look at this file, it's kind of at an angle. So I'm going to use my rectangle shape tool, and then I'm going to go into my stroke options. I'm going to make sure I have black selected, and then I'm going to adjust the size of my stroke, and I'm going to create a rectangle. If you're finding that your rectangle isn't showing up, just double check your layers as I am here, and you can pull that specific layer so that it goes above all of the other elements. Once I have the rectangle as I like, I'm going to use my pen tool to create the flaps of the actual envelope. So I'm just going to click on one corner, bring it down to a point within the center of that rectangle, click on that point again, and then bring that point up to the other edge of my envelope. And then I'm just going to create some additional lines that go from the center of these points, like the center of the top flap, down to the corners. And then I'm going to select all of these elements and I'm going to group them together. Once I'm happy with this, then I'm going to add kind of like those squiggly lines that they have on the sides of these. You can use your brush tools, but I find utilizing the smart options on your pen tool is the easiest way to go about this. You can create curves and then just copy that curve over and over again. So what I will do is I'll select my pen tool, and then in my lower options, I'm going to change my mode to I'm going to change my mode from pen to smart, and that will allow the pen to know that it's supposed to be creating curves. And then I'll just create kind of like a zigzaggy pattern. And then I'm going to adjust these with the node tool so that I can soften them and adjust them so that they look the way I want them to look. And then I'm going to go over to my studio options. I'm going to select my stroke options, and then I'm going to increase the width of it. And then once I'm happy with that, then I'm going to go up to my menu options and I'm going to select duplicate, and then I'm going to pull it down with the move tool selected. And then I'm going to duplicate this 3 or 4 more times so that I have 5 or 6 of these. And then if you need to, you can go in and zoom in and kind of like fine tune things. If any of these elements are kind of overlapping, just use your move tool to pull them into the specific lines that you need them to be hidden by, or you can resize them. And then, as we did with everything else, we're going to select all of these lines and then go to your layers options and select group. So now what we need to do is add some lines for the return address. I'm just gonna add straight basic lines. I'm gonna use my pen tool to create a line and put that in the upper left-hand corner of the envelope. And then I'm just gonna duplicate those lines under File or under Edit, Duplicate. And then I'm gonna drag them down, and I'm gonna have 3 lines total. And then I'm gonna select them all, and I'm going to group them together. Now I want to add in Santa's address. So you could just put to Santa Claus, North Pole, but the United States Post Office actually allows and accepts letters to Santa for them to deliver. And there's some really great programs that go along with this for all of the adults watching in terms of ways to give back to your community. So I would highly suggest checking out their website. But what I'm showing you right here is there is the Operation Santa. So basically the US Post Office does some really fun stuff, and you can send a letter to Santa, and they have a specific address, and it's 123 Elf Road, North Pole, 88888. I'm gonna go to my text tool, and I'm gonna fill this out and include the Santa North Pole address. I'm gonna change my font and my lower font options at the bottom of my screen to American typewriter. Again, just keeping in line with the same kind of consistent themes that we've been using this whole entire month. And I think 36 might be a little too big, so I'm gonna size it down probably to about 25, 26. And then I'm gonna have to rotate the text around so that it is in line with the shape of this envelope. And then I'm just gonna duplicate the Santa Claus text and pull it down, and I'm gonna update it with the actual address. And what you'll find is if it's too close to the reindeer, you may just need to move it over a bit. So you can just move it and then play around with the placement so that it looks like you want it to look like. So now I'm mostly done with everything. What I want to do though is pull in some of those fun additional like mail elements that I found on freepick.com. So there is this airmail vector element. So I'm going to go to that stamp EPS file. I'm going to select the airmail. I'm going to copy it, and then I'm going to go back into my file with the actual envelope, and then I'm going to go into my edit options, and I'm going to select paste. I'm going to rotate this, and then I'm going to increase it in size by pulling out the corners of this, and then I'm going to move it so that it's right underneath our stamp. And then there's one additional element I want to pull in. I found these fun kind of like snowflakes. So I'm going to go into my snowflake file. It's an EPS file, again, freepick.com. I'm going to select this by utilizing my select tool, and then you can group it together or just copy it and then bring it into your file that you're working on. Go to your edit options, select paste. And then, of course, since this is white, we're going to have to recolor it. So the easiest way to do that, you can go to your layer effects, in your studio panel, and then you're going to select something called color overlay. So you're going to turn it on by clicking on the little button, it'll turn blue. Then click on the words color overlay and your overlay options will pop up at the very bottom. And then you can adjust the color by clicking on the color. And I'm just going to do kind of like a red. And I'm going to leave this in the lower, like little, I want to say left-hand corner of this envelope, just so that it has like a fun little festive element aside from the reindeer that we have. And then I think this is complete. So now what we need to do is export this file. So I'm going to go to my document menu, I'm going to select export, and then I'll get this new pop-up. I'm going to select PNG. I can rename the file, and then I'm going to select where I'd like to save it. So once I've renamed it, I'm going to save it on my iPad. And then once that's done, I'm going to go into my file system, and then I need to send this over to my computer so that I can print it out. Once I'm in my file system, I'm going to go and hit select in the upper right hand corner, and then I'm going to select the item that I want to share. And once I've selected it, I'm going to hit share, and then I'm going to select airdrop because I just want to send it to my computer. And then I'm going to airdrop it over to my laptop so I can print. You could email this to yourself if you wanted, if it's easier, if you don't have a Mac or anything like that, that's totally fine. Or you can print it directly from your iPad as well. I just want to have a higher quality print. I find that when I print from my iPad, I don't get as high a quality print, so I'm just printing it from my computer. So instead of making this complicated, I figured we would just cut this one out by hand using scissors, and then we're going to glue it together. It's really simple. All you have to do is follow the cut lines on the outside. Don't cut on the inside. Those are your fold lines. And then we can get to assembling this. So once you've cut everything out, it'll look like this. This address I used is based on the United States Postal Office suggestions for Santa's address. So basically, you can just put Santa on the front, but they prefer his official post service address. And then you should also apply an actual first class stamp to the upper right hand corner if you plan to send this through the United States Post Office. And this is the address that they suggest. So now all we have to do is fold along these cut lines. Keep in mind this is the top, these are the sides, and this is the bottom. We're going to pull the sides in first, and then we're just going to use some Elmer's glue stick.